Remember this shoe, the Altra Vanish Carbon? Well, I'm happy to say that it has vanished. And in its place is the new Vanish Carbon 2. And I'm happy to say that Altra has finally made a shoe that is going to live up to its name. With the Vanish 2, you are going to vanish from the competition on race day. Let's get into it. Okay, first of all, let's get started off with those disclosures. Altra was good enough to send me a pair of the Vanish Carbon 2 for the purpose of review. However, they haven't told me what to say, they don't have any editorial privileges, and all the thoughts and opinions are my own. With that said, you can pick up a pair of the Altra Vanish Carbon 2 for $260. And of course, I will place a link to that if you want to pick up a pair from my friends over at Roadrunner Sports. Okay, let's just dig into that price for just a second. $260 is a lot of money, but if you are thinking of getting this shoe, or after this video, if you are thinking of getting this shoe, I think it represents incredible value. And of course, we've got to compare it to those other race shoes that you might be looking at. But when we do take other shoes into account, the Vanish Carbon 2 offers exactly what they're offering. We have a top-of-the-line carbon-plated race-ready shoe, but you're probably going to need more than that. So let's get into some details. The Altra Vanish Carbon 2 has 36mm in the heel, 36mm in the forefoot for a 0mm drop. This is a zero drop shoe, folks. Now we're going to talk more about what that means and how it feels on the run in just a second. But this is the first upgrade over V1. We now have a 36mm stack. In the previous version of the Vanish Carbon, we had 33mm. Now, Altra claims that in a US men's size 9, the Vanish Carbon 2 would tip the scale at 8.1 ounces or 229 grams. However, in my size, a US men's size 13, it tips the scale at 9.6 ounces or 273 grams. So I actually think that is a very good weight for this shoe. It is on the upper end of weights as far as some of the race day shoes go. For example, it's lighter than my Tier Valkyrie Elites, it's lighter than my CLO X1s, but it's about 48 grams heavier than my very lightest shoe, the Asics Metaspeed Edge Paris. But to be fair, not a lot of shoes actually compete with that weight class of the Metaspeed Edge Paris, and this is still a very light shoe. Okay, so let's just talk briefly about the upgrade over last year's Vanish Carbon, because the previous Vanish Carbon, it was a solid shoe. However, there was a few things that I really didn't like, and I thought it was more of a speed day shoe than an actual race shoe. And this, at least to me, is where Altra has made some giant steps. Because you know how a lot of brands from year to year, they just do incremental upgrades on their models, right? We might just have a new upper, they might reshape the midsole, you know, just small, tiny little things. It seems to me that the old Vanish Carbon was a caterpillar, and what has emerged is a beautiful butterfly. So while a lot of times I might recommend that you buy the previous model in order to save a bit of money, this is not the case with the Vanish Carbon and the Vanish Carbon 2. Forget the Vanish Carbon, you want the Vanish Carbon 2, this is a solid shoe. Okay, let's start at the top, let's work our way down. Look at this heel collar, it is barely there, it's very thin. And as far as padding goes, look here right on the back, we got these two kind of little pads, little bolsters that just kind of grip the back of your ankle. It works very well. The heel counter, it's fairly flexible, but there is a little bit of rigidity right here at the bottom. And actually, until I actually sat down to make this video, I hadn't actually pressed down on this heel counter. But while I was running, I didn't notice any heel slip. So a lot of the times in race day shoes, when we have a very minimal heel counter, I feel like I have to use these two little holes in order to use the lace lock method. By the way, the Vanish Carbon 2 does have these extra holes for the lace lock in case you needed to lock down your heel. But for me, that wasn't necessary. I did get a good fit right out of the box, just lacing them normally. The upper is light and airy, exactly what we think, except the upper on the Vanish Carbon 2 is almost exactly like the screen that you would have in a lanai or a screen door. It's kind of rough, it almost feels like it's got a plastic element to it, but it is so airy and totally translucent. You can see your toes wiggling around when they're in the shoe. So there is absolutely no way that your feet are going to overheat when you're out on race day in the middle of summer. But on the other side, if you were using these shoes to race in winter, I could see how your feet might get a little cold because this shoe is really airy. Now we do have some overlays. We have one big overlay coming right around the toe box, and that's providing just a little structure to that upper to keep it off your toes. This section right at the back of the shoe is like one big overlay that comes around. It's very thin and it's just providing a little bit of structure to the upper. But Altra has included some holes on both the lateral and the medial side, and these holes are just providing a little ventilation for your heel, which I actually think is a good design decision, because on other shoes that are super light and they have a bit of structure here at the back, I often think that what if my heels get too sweaty? What if they overheat? Well, there's no way that's going to happen with this shoe because we do have these holes laser cut in the back. It's pretty nice. Of course, we've got the standard overlays coming right along the eyelet chain just to give a little strength to that. And then I want to draw your attention to the inside of the shoe, because there is a midfoot band, and that midfoot band kind of extends from about here and then it moves into this area, which is what you can actually see. So this white bit right here, we can actually see what seems like straps coming down, that actually extends forward into the mesh area, and it's creating a nice midfoot band that gives you a great midfoot lockdown. It's very nice and it makes the shoe fit like a dream. Now also we have a gusseted tongue, so it's gusseted on both sides, but that is is separate from these midfoot bands. The tongue is super thin, it's got some strategic padding, and that padding I think is positioned perfectly to prevent lace bite. I mean, it is really just right here in the middle, so when you cinch down those laces, padding is in the sweet spot. Now there is no lace loop in the middle, but the tongue being gusseted, the tongue isn't going to move around once your foot is in. Now it wouldn't be an Altra shoe without a foot-shaped toe box. And as you already know, Altra actually uses several different styles of their foot-shaped toe box. We have original, which is the widest, standard, which is a bit narrower, and then slim, which is narrower still. Obviously this being a speed or race day shoe, we want to conserve weight. We want it to be a little tighter fitting. So obviously Altra is going to use the slim foot-shaped toe box for the Vanish Carbon 2. Now, even though my feet are generally quite narrow, I still had plenty of room in this shoe, and my feet had lots of room to move around. It's very comfortable. If you did have slightly wider feet, I say slightly wider feet than me, you don't actually know how wide my feet are, but still I'll stand by it. If you have slightly wider feet than me, the shoe is still going to fit you very nicely. I feel like my feet could be a little bit bigger and still have a great fit. Okay, let's come down to the midsole. And again, Altra has made some huge changes. In fact, they probably could have renamed this shoe because it is so different from its predecessor. But they are still using their Ego Pro midsole. Now, Ego Pro is a supercritical TPE foam. It's light, it is very responsive. It's exactly what we want in a race day shoe. But they have made this version of the Ego Pro foam 32% lighter than the previous version. It's also more pliable, it provides more cushion, and it's more responsive. And my friends, it is a night and day difference. What Altra has going on down here in their Ego Pro foam now, and the carbon fiber plate, we'll get to that in a second. But if I had to put it down to one thing that makes the biggest difference, it's this formulation of Ego Pro foam. It is just fantastic. It's fun to run in. Okay, because this is a race day shoe, we also have a full-length carbon fiber plate. If you remember last year in the Vanish Carbon, we had a 3/4 length carbon fiber plate. So this is a brand new carbon fiber plate, and it's been redesigned along with the midsole, and then along with these flex grooves that are cut into the forefoot, and it's going to provide 75% greater flexibility. And I thought to myself, how do you measure flexibility? Like, this still seems quite stiff, but I am able to bend it. So then I went and looked at last year's model, the Vanish Carbon, and when I tried to bend it, this shoe is super rigid. Now, of course, my hands haven't been calibrated correctly, but if I had to say, it certainly feels like this is 75% more flexible, maybe even 76%. Anyway, much like everything else Altra has done with the Vanish Carbon 2, it is a huge improvement. And then, of course, coming back down to the outsole, we have a lot of outsole rub, a good amount of coverage here on the forefoot, lots of coverage here on the heel. Now, as in the making of this video, I've put a little more than 50K in this shoe, and I'm seeing a slight amount of wear here on the heel, or am I? Like, it's that slight that I'm really not sure. Yeah, maybe not. Let me look up on the forefoot. Nah, there doesn't seem to be any wear on the forefoot. So I guess that's telling me that this shoe is going to stand up to a lot of punishment. I mean, it is a race day shoe. You know how these race day shoes, they don't tend to last as long as normal shoes. But just looking at the amount of wear that I've got on mine, I'm going to say that these are going to last higher than average. And by average, I mean like average carbon plated race day shoes. Okay, so let's talk about the ride, because to me this does not ride like a lot of other zero drop shoes that I've run in, and I think that's to do with a few things. First of all, we've got this reformulation of the Ego Pro. I think it's softer, so it's a little more forgiving with each step, but also we do have this rocker shape, and the shoe just seems to flow nicely from midfoot to toe off. Now, for those of you that have been watching me for a while, you know that I am well and truly a heel striker, and also a zero drop shoe is not a heel striker's absolute best friend, but a zero drop shoe is also going to encourage you to land more midfoot than a shoe with a high drop will. And that's exactly what I found happening to me. Now, because I test running shoes on a regular basis, I do run in a lot of different drops, and I run in a zero drop shoe fairly often. But with that said, I thought it was notable that after I ran in this shoe 3 days in a row, I didn't experience any of those little aches that you get from doing too much too soon in a zero drop. Like if you are coming from a max stack height or max drop shoe, like a 10mm or 12mm drop, and you come down to a 0mm drop, you're using different muscles to run. And if you don't ease into it, you can sometimes get little aches from using the muscles that you haven't been using. That wasn't my experience with the Vanish Carbon 2, and all in all, it was a treat to run in every time I took it out. Now, with race day shoes, we often talk about stability. Sometimes those race day shoes feel a bit wobbly, especially when you go around corners. That wobbliness that is inherent with high stack height race day shoes is non-existent on the Vanish Carbon 2. We can see this nice, wide, stable base. Now, we've only got 36mm of stack, so perhaps that contributes to that stable feeling as well. Maybe another 4mm would make a big difference, but I don't think so. I think it does come down to this wide foot base we've got right here. Guys, I've got to tell you that this has now become my favorite Altra shoe I have ever run in. And I know a lot of you are thinking, nah, of course, it's a $260 shoe. It's the very pinnacle of research and design that has been specifically made to be epic in every way. And you're right, but I'll tell you something else, I didn't feel that way about the original Vanish Carbon. In fact, up until I started running in the Vanish Carbon 2, my favorite Altra shoe was this. This is the Torin 7. I think this is a fantastic daily trainer, and I think it's a great training partner if you want this, the Vanish Carbon 2. So if you're looking to incorporate a zero drop shoe into your rotation, whether that be a daily trainer or you're looking for something fast that feels great underfoot, this video is about the Vanish Carbon 2. So I definitely recommend you pick up this. But if you want to save this for race day and you want to train in something else, Torrent 7 is definitely worth a link too. And of course, I'll place a link to both of these in the show notes below. Alright guys, that's it. This has been a good video to make because I have really enjoyed running in this shoe. So for now, it's Matt B. This has been my review of the Altra Vanish Carbon 2. Be kind, be happy, run well. I'll see you in a couple of days. You know what? I didn't actually talk about how this shoe looks. I love the design. I love this Ultra written on the medial side. I think just everything about this shoe looks super sharp.